Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where you will hear stories about everyday people who, in addition to their everyday lives, make the commitment to hike long-distance trails where every section is a new beginning. I am back today with part 2 of the why, the way, and the will. If you are new to the podcast and this is your first time listening, I introduced a 3-part mini-series last episode, and today we are going to continue with part 2. The 3-part mini-series is based around our guest that went on a 3-year section hiking journey of the Eastern Continental Trail and beyond. In part 1 of the series, we focused on the why and learned who our guest is and why he took on such a monumental task. Before I reintroduce my guest today, I just want to remind everyone that from March 29th, 2017 to March 29th, 2020, my guest hiked 5,000 plus miles, 17 states, 22 degrees of latitude, 9 long trails, and a few hundred miles of country roads to connect them all. He completed the main section of the International Appalachian Trail, the Appalachian Trail, Benton MacKaye Trail, Pinhoti Trail, the Alabama Roadwalk, the Florida Trail, and the Key West Everglades Roadwalk to complete the Eastern Continental Trail. In addition to the trails that make up the ECT, he also completed the Bartram Trail, Foothills Trail, and the Palmetto Trail. He is extremely thankful for all the trail organizations, maintainers, volunteers, hiking organizations, and trail angels that made all of this possible. I welcome all of you back to part 2 of the why, the way, and the will with section hiker Will Dukes, aka Tickbait. Welcome back to the podcast, Will.
Good morning.
Very good to see you on here. Ladies and gentlemen, he has a huge smile on his face, so that tells me, Will, you are ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I've had my coffee, and I'm excited to get started.
And life is good since we've both had our coffee. So for this part 2 series, I really want to focus on the trails themselves that make up the Eastern Continental Trail, because this is a monumental task to complete these trails, which in turn is why we're having a 3-part series. But there's something I missed asking you on the first episode, Will, and that was about your trail name. So please fill us in on how you got your trail name, Tickbait.
So my trail name was given to me from my hiking buddy Nonsense, who I met on the Florida Trail. I was dealing with a bit of a foot injury, and since he was local, he put me up for a while at his place, I think about a week. And after getting off the trail and going to his home, I discovered that I had a tick embedded in my head. And it had been there for a little while because it was completely engorged. I was concerned about it. And, concerned about Lyme disease and things like that. His wife, who was a nurse, was really reassuring and helped me, talk me down from the self-diagnosis, since I had just a little headache. But from then on, she knew me as Tick Bite. That was her short name for me, was Tick Bite. So later on, Nonsense and we had become pretty good friends, and he came up to visit me in my neck of the woods, and we did a little backpacking trip up in North Carolina around the NOC. And as kind of a joke, he started calling me Tick Bite, and he would not stop calling me Tick Bite. He said, "That's your new trail name. That's your new trail name." And I was not going to have it. Tick Bite was not going to be my trail name. It just wasn't going to be my trail name. I'm not having it. But one of those times he was playing around with it, and he switched it to Tick Bait. And I was like, well, Tick Bait is a bit different. It's got a bit of a different sound. So I reluctantly accepted Tick Bait as my trail name. But so the story is not as good as what you might think when you imagine Tick Bait. You could imagine any number of horror stories. But yeah, it was just one tick.
Well, Will, that's the beauty of your trail name, is because it's like, ooh, tick bait. Okay, how many ticks does he have on him? Does he always get ticks? I mean, it's just, the lure of the tick. And I will say the number one thing that I'm afraid of on the trail, besides running out of toilet paper, is a tick. I mean, I'm serious. Like, the tick is like the invisible little creature that can actually take you out. So, and I think all hikers listening to this will go, yes. I'm afraid of a tick.
Yeah, they're pretty scary, and I've luckily I've only had a couple on trail, and that was the one that had stayed in the longest. But crossing my fingers, no symptoms or anything like that of anything. But yeah, the name is unique. I get a lot of kind of a cringe face whenever I say my name, and people saying, "Oh, what's that?" But it is a unique trail name, and I'm gonna stick to it.
And you are sticking to it, and I love it. So let's go back a little bit. So last episode was absolutely amazing, and you told us a little bit about who you are, how you got started on this thing, and your journey. But you left the trail in 2017 in Connecticut because you had some foot issues. So before we get into probably what is going to be your favorite part of the podcast, where we individually talk about each one of these trails and Will's highlights of each one, let's tell the listeners about 2018, what sections you picked up with in 2018 and kind of where you left off. And then we will continue that in part 3.
Okay, so we left off. I had just gotten off the trail in Connecticut with this foot issue, and it was this sort of pain on the top of my foot, and it wouldn't go away. I had done something that I probably shouldn't have done to bring it on. I tried my own personal 24-hour challenge, and I did 42 miles through southern Massachusetts down to Kent, Connecticut, and then suddenly, what do you know, my foot is hurting. And it did it for a few days. I had to leave and go because I think I said this before, but an injury that you've walked on, you can't walk off. And it was apparent that this was not going to go away. So after I think I went to the doctor, and they said they gave me a boot to put it in, one of those cam boots. And they said, you're stuck in this boot for 6 weeks. And so it was clear I couldn't go back to the trail for a while. This was November when I got off the trail. So when my foot finally did heal, it was winter. And the last thing you want to do is go to New England in the winter and try to hike. So in 2018, in January, I did about the only thing that I could do, and that was go to a part of the trail that was much warmer, which, Key West, much warmer than Connecticut. So I started there. What was a Sobo ECT through attempt turned into kind of a flip flop, and I started in Key West. But it turns out Key West the Keys in general they're expensive. Anybody who has hiked the ECT will tell you that camping down there is really difficult. So everything is expensive and difficult. So you want to get through there quick. I ended up pushing way too hard through the Keys in shoes that I had never tried before. I was using these sneakers instead of my boots. And lo and behold, pushing 15 and 20-mile days through the Keys immediately aggravated that foot injury. So I made it to just north of Homestead, Florida, and I had to get off again after just, a little under 200 miles. Went back home, got a job, worked, doing odd jobs, working for different places, saving money for my next section because I was not willing to compromise on this. I was not going to quit, but I had to keep working towards the goal. So I saved money and did my best to get ready and stay active and healthy. And I started in Connecticut, where I left off that summer after healing my foot. From Connecticut, I made it 500 and I think 25 miles ish down to the Shenandoah National Park, where I had the same foot injury. So you can see this is becoming kind of a theme. Something's going on there.
There's a theme here. It's called something's going on with your foot. So, okay. So now you've given us a picture kind of, in the first episode, here's where you left off. And here we are in part 2. And we went down to Key West. We did some hiking on the road. We went back up to Connecticut. Now we're down to the Shenandoahs and we have the same foot thing. So when you got off the trail this time, did you get new shoes? Like, how did you start trying to rectify this issue? Because you've stated multiple times, not finishing this was not an option. So just talk to us a little bit about decisions about footwear going forward.
Hiking, 4,200 miles from across the entire United States, north to south, is a huge undertaking. And it started to feel like it wasn't going to happen. This is just not in the cards. And I even had friends tell me, this is a sign you should stop. This is, what are you doing? You keep hurting your foot. And you would think, people were really encouraging me to quit. And I was frustrated with that because I was not willing to give it up. But it definitely was a sign, that I needed to do something differently. When I was in Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania, I met a hiker behind the ATC place there. And, I was having a little pain in my foot there. And the guy said, I used to have the exact same issue. And when I switched to Hoka shoes, Hoka 1-1s, he said his issue disappeared. And that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. Unfortunately, I didn't switch to them immediately. And I had this issue one more time. But that is the shoe I ended up settling on and the one that fixed most of the problems.
Perfect. Well, Will, I am glad you got that worked out. And quite honestly, I think a lot of listeners can understand when you say people were trying to talk you out of finishing the trail. Because when I was going along on my journey on the Appalachian Trail, I can't really say people tried to talk me out of it, but people would say, well, don't do it if you don't want to, or, nobody's really going to know what you did and this and that. And I would say in my mind, no, I know what goal I set out to do. I know my continuous footsteps. So we totally understand that, Will. And I'm glad you got your shoes worked out and all that wonderful stuff. So here we are in that second year, but I want to spend the rest of this episode really talking about what you love about each trail that encompasses the Eastern Continental Trail. And we'll just kind of go in order here, starting from the north. So I just want you to give the listeners a little bit of information about each trail, and we'll start off with the American portion of the International Appalachian Trail. So where exactly does that start? And we'll kind of go from there.
So the main section of the International Appalachian Trail, the American section, starts at the border crossing at Fort Fairfield, Maine, which is a really small town in northern Maine, very rural, picturesque kind of rolling hills town. It goes from there, and it is kind of a big backwards L shape. Goes due south and then due west to Katahdin. It follows a lot of old snowmobile trails and things like that, two track, and it's a really beautiful trail.
So how many miles is that portion of the IAT?
It's roughly 130 miles, and it has some really unique features. It follows the border clearing between the United States and Canada for 15 miles. It goes over a wind farm, and then follows these snowmobile and multi-use trails over towards Baxter.
And I'm just visualizing going on this trail down to for those of you that have seen Baxter State Park and just visualizing, seeing Katahdin like you talked about in the last episode. So what are the markings? Are there blazes? Like what's going down with that?
It's, and this is the thing. This is not for anyone who's accustomed to walking on something like the Appalachian Trail or, any of the other big trails that are really well maintained. This is not that. This is a route of, there are some sections of trail, but this is you print off a PDF of the guide and you are kind of on your own. And in some places there are flagging tape marking, especially on the border clearing area. You've got to really keep your wits about you. In other places, there are little plaques that mark turns, especially on the roadwalks. There was about a 70-mile roadwalk in that one. But other than that, you're kind of on your own for the very sparse markings.
So what would you say your highlight of that portion of the ECT is?
Well, there were two quick ones. On the 70-mile roadwalk that runs between, I believe the town is Holton, Maine. It's I might be getting that wrong. It's the border town right on I-95 at the northern end. There's a 70-mile roadwalk between there and Baxter, and it goes through these really beautiful, these potato fields and rolling hills and stuff. And walking down that road, I happened to stop at a community. There was an Amish community, and one of the guys came over and started talking and chatting with me. And I asked him where the next water is, and he actually ended up inviting me to stay the night with their community, and it was really interesting. I got to they made me a huge home cooked meal. Actually, the community came together and made a big home cooked meal. We sang hymns and then played Amish checkers. It was a game called Der Schnickelfritz, and it's this 4-way checkers.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a really, really wholesome, fun night. It was an incredible experience. Ironically, I ended up leaving my headlamp with them, and I had no way to call them to get them to run it down to me. So I was headlampless after that. But that was a big highlight. And then the next highlight, I think I mentioned in the last episode, was seeing Katahdin in the distance and seeing that beast of a mountain get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and knowing I'm almost to the AT. That was cool.
And what an amazing story. I mean, literally, you had me right there with you with, eating and the meal and playing checkers. So no better way and you already led us to the next trail heading south, the Appalachian Trail. And quite honestly, I think you did a phenomenal job in the last episode of really highlighting your favorite part of the Appalachian Trail. And I know you want to get on to the other trails. Is there anything more you want to say about the AT?
Well, I think the AT is really popular. People know about the AT. I mean, the AT is an amazing trail. I met tons of amazing people. The community is great, and it's big, and it's probably my favorite trail, but it's pretty well known, and but beautiful, wonderful trail, amazing from Maine to Georgia.
Well, let's get on to some of these I say lesser known trails. They are lesser known and they're lesser hiked. So let's talk about the Benton MacKaye Trail. So basically, when you leave the Appalachian Trail down at Springer Mountain, you have to actually walk north a little bit to get back on the Benton MacKaye Trail. So talk to us about the Benton MacKaye. Where is it? How many miles? Let's start off there.
So the Benton MacKaye Trail starts at Springer. So when you finish your Appalachian Trail walk, if you're headed south, then that's your next trail, and you pick it up right on Springer, and you go north. So the portion in the ECT is 73 miles. I ended up completing that trail in different sections during this time, but the ECT portion is 73 miles. And it's pretty similar to the AT most of the time. There are a few sections where it goes through neighborhoods and things like that, but it's you're used to that kind of terrain, and the trail is well maintained and well marked, and there's gut hooks available for it.
So what is your highlight, from the Benton MacKaye Trail? I don't know how you're going to top seeing Katahdin and staying with the Amish, but
Well, I love the Benton MacKaye Trail. It's a great trail. The Benton MacKaye Trail Association puts in a lot of work to maintain that trail. They do a great job. That particular section of the trail, I was really rushing to get through. So I was just pounding out the miles. After I finished the AT, I was on a mission. And, I think the highlight was staying, probably I stayed at a little apartment above a convenience store one night at the Toccoa River, and that was kind of cool. But it was kind of, due to the nature of speeding through, it was there wasn't anything particularly amazing about that section. I dug my heels in, and I was moving as fast as I could.
Which leads us to, when you get off the Benton MacKaye Trail, you actually connect. Your next trail would be the Pinhoti Trail. And I can't talk about the Pinhoti Trail without bringing up Kim and Nathan at the Pinhoti Outdoor Center. They were actually on the podcast a few episodes back. But so that's what reminds me of the Pinhoti. I've actually not been on the trail. So let's talk about that a little bit, Will. So where is it? How many miles of the ECT does that contain, and all that good stuff?
So the Pinhoti connects the Benton MacKaye Trail, and it takes you on trail, mostly on trail, down into south central or rather central Alabama. It's about 350 miles. The Pinhoti has really similar terrain to the AT and to the other trails, the Benton MacKaye Trail and some of the other trails in the Appalachians. It's really interesting because you cross from the Blue Ridge into you cross what's called the Great Valley, and you go over to the Ridge and Valley section of the Appalachians. So when you cross around Dalton, Georgia, you cross over into that Ridge and Valley. It's pretty similar to parts of Virginia and Pennsylvania in its feel. And you have these long, narrow ridges, not quite as rocky as Pennsylvania, but really you feel at home. Feel like you're on the AT. Aside from, a few road walks that are, a couple of 30-mile road walks involved, especially in the Georgia section. I got to say, the Alabama Pinhoti section is immaculately maintained. The shelters are incredible. And it's beautiful. There's a trail town there called Heflin, which they bend over backwards to support hikers. They are all about their hikers. And you also mentioned Nathan and Kim down at the Pinhoti Outdoor Center. Those guys, I met them at Billy Goat Days in Florida, which is a Florida trail event, and we connected. And they make themselves available to every hiker that comes through, and they help everybody. They're fantastic. And they not only do they help you with the Pinhoti, but they helped me with the next section a whole lot. I couldn't have done it the way I did it without them, the Alabama Road Walk. But one of the highlights of the Pinhoti too was meeting this guy, Nimblewheel Nomad, who lives at Flag Mountain down there at the southern end of the Pinhoti Trail. And he is a huge inspiration of mine. He's one of the first, maybe the first person to do the Eastern Continental Trail, and was just someone that I really looked up to and do still look up to. And I had he's a legend. And I had the chance to meet him down at Winterfest down there at the Pinhoti, at the southern end of the Pinhoti, and that was that's the highlight of the Pinhoti for me, was meeting Nimblewheel. But yeah, Pinhoti was a great trail, and it was you walk to the last mountain in the Appalachians, and when you cross Flag Mountain, you look out and you can start to see this is turning into the coastal plain. It's going to be a different kind of hike once you leave there. And you're starting to see.
I wish all of
plants.
you could see Will's face right now, because Will is absolutely smiling. I mean, literally, I'm watching him describe this, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see your face and how you're remembering this, and really taking us through those moments of what that looks like. That is awesome. So I say continue on that and lead us to the Alabama Road Walk.
Well, it's funny because you're going south, and one of the big things that stood out to me for the ECT is these transitions. The transitions to the forest types and the land, you really get to see those transitions on this trail. So coming down from the last mountain in the Appalachian Mountains, you're already starting to see species like longleaf pine and different things like that. But you come down to the Alabama Road Walk, and suddenly you're in a different world. You're in coastal plain. And it's not long after that, you've got this 200-mile road walk that you begin to see things like Spanish moss and palmettos and things like that. And it really feels like the South. The Alabama Road Walk was blazed by Nimblewheel Nomad, and it is a route through just these really beautiful, picturesque, I think it's beautiful, farmland in southern Alabama. It also takes you through Montgomery. Now, so for someone who had hiked on trail exclusively, this is a different world. And hiking through downtown Montgomery is hiking through a city is completely different. And so that was interesting.
Well, I have a question for you. How is
Sure.
that mentally to go from Green Tunnel, so to speak? You're still through Green Tunnel on the Benton MacKay. You get down to the Pinhoti. You're starting to see, where the Southern Appalachians end. How is that mentally to know you're going to be on the road?
Well, at this point, I had some experience with road. I had 70 miles of road walk on the International AT. By this time, I had done the Keys and I had done sections of the Florida Trail. So I was used to road walk, and I was making 20 miles a day. So for me, yeah, it's kind of, I had become accustomed to it. For someone who isn't accustomed to this, it's challenging. And I cut my teeth on the stealth camping and stuff like that in the Keys. So once you're used to doing that kind of thing, the Alabama Road Walk is not so bad. But camping is a challenge, traffic is a challenge, dogs are a challenge. It's not hiking, it's road walking.
It's road walking. So would you say your highlight is Montgomery, or do you have another highlight that's going to lead us, down to the wonderful Florida Trail that I know you are really excited to talk about?
The highlight, it was pretty challenging. My phone broke. I went several days without a phone. I lost my maps, Google Maps. So I had to copy a map down and wrestle to get my phone delivered. And it was a challenge. It was really a challenge. The road walk was a challenge. I guess the highlight was making it through successfully. And I did have positive interactions with a lot of people, but there wasn't any standout highlight. But I made it down to the next section, to the Blackwater Connector of the Florida Trail, and I was back on trail and excited to be there.
Perfect. So let's talk about the Florida Trail, because in our previous conversations, you really light up when you talk about a particular aspect of the Florida Trail. And so let's give people some logistics about it first. So obviously it's in Florida. How many miles is it? What's the terrain? All that good stuff.
So the Florida Trail is about 1,100 miles. It runs from if you look at it on a map, from Pensacola to just west of Miami. So it runs through if you know the geography of Florida, that's as far away points in Florida as you can get. It runs through the Panhandle, basically to the center of the peninsula or along the Georgia border, and then goes south through Gainesville, Orlando, and then down to Okeechobee and into the Everglades. There, it actually, the terminus is right at the northern border of the Everglades National Park, and where Big Cypress National Preserve are. So it's a long trail. The thing about the Florida Trail, the terrain is all flat. You don't have to worry about any climbs. Your biggest climb, I think there may be something in the 100-foot range along the Swanee River, but it's flat. The one thing you do have to not worry about or contend with is wet trail. And that is something that is unique, typically to the Florida Trail, unless you're hiking in a flooded situation on the AT. I could count the number of times that I was in ankle deep water on the AT. There were a lot of times when I was in water on the Florida Trail. But, when you hike the ECT, you're agreeing to these challenges. And I wouldn't say that's a detriment if you're prepared for it. And if you're not willing to compromise you're willing to compromise a bit on your comfort for the goal, But overall, the Florida Trail is, it's flat. It has a variety of forest types. I get into plants because one thing that I had to do on the trail was, if you're staring at plants every day, you are going to get bored if you're not into plants, in my opinion. So I started learning about the plants. And one thing that Florida has is amazing wilderness areas with a diversity in plants that you can't see anywhere else in the country. Maybe someplace like Hawaii, but Florida has amazing, amazing swamps and oak hammocks and sawgrass prairie. And the number of different forest types in Florida is amazing. And there's a lot of beautiful land to look at. And I've been guilty in the past of sort of discounting Florida as this, trashy tourist destination, but there's a lot more.
Well, I'm glad you're painting this picture for us, because most people think of Florida. I think of Disneyland as soon as I, think of Florida. It's burning up hot, the humidity, blah, 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 crowded beaches, all that kind of stuff. And I think people discount this amazing national scenic trail that you are describing to us. And I want everybody right now to go over to Instagram and follow Will at Walks Too Much, because phenomenal pictures on your Instagram of exactly what you're talking about. The plants, the flowers, the things that you saw on these trails. Absolutely amazing.
Well, the diversity in there's not a lot of diversity in terrain in Florida, as far as, most of it is flat. But the diversity in forest is incredible, because, the transitions that you see on the Appalachian Trail over 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet going up a mountain are the same kinds of transitions that you see in Florida going up 10 feet in elevation. So you will go to a completely different forest type, from a swamp to an oak hammock, over the course of 5 or 10 feet in elevation. It's beautiful. I can't tell you and how unique it is, and the unique forest types. There's Florida scrub, which is almost this semi-arid desert-like portion in the middle of the state. And then all the way down to, crystal clear springs, bubbling up out of the ground, rivers coming from nowhere, crystal clear water, just incredible. But the one aspect of the Florida Trail that all of that is amazing, and there's a lot to appreciate there. and there are unique challenges to the Florida Trail, some road walking, some swamps. The majority of the time your feet are not going to be wet, but there are challenges. But the one thing about the Florida Trail that was unique to all other trails was the feel of the community. I can't tell you enough about how amazing the Florida Trail community is. I mean, bar none, including the Appalachian Trail. I've never met a more tight-knit, supportive group of people than the Florida Trail community. The Pinhoti Trail has a lot of good things like that going too, and some of the other trails too. But the Florida Trail, I mean, it was great. The trail angels. There's a lack of hostels on the Florida Trail, like where people who hike the AT or the PCT may know that every few days you're going to get a hostel with a shower and a bed and everything, and that's not there a lot of times on the Florida Trail. But what there are is a network of dedicated trail angels who put people up and help hikers out. And there's Sean and Kelly in Crestview, Wilton Quattlebaum at the Hillcrest Baptist Church. There are tons of others in the South. There's some at Lake Butler and scattered across Florida. A lot of them I didn't have the opportunity to meet, but there are amazing people on the trail. And every year they have a trail event, kind of like a tiny trail days. And it's called Billy Goat Days. And they shuttle the hiker, all of the thru hikers, they shuttle them all in. Everybody gets together and they go pick up the thru hikers across the entire state. And they bring everybody into this park near Orlando, and you have just this great time, and they really make you feel like part of the community. And I, to this day, I think, the AT is probably, my standard favorite trail, but nothing beats the work that the Florida Trail Association and FT Thru Hike does. Chris down there doing good work. So can't talk enough about that. Obviously, I'm going on.
Right. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you guys could see Will talking about the Florida Trail, I'm telling you right now, big smiles ear to ear. And it's amazing. And I just keep going back to, it's amazing what you've done on this Eastern Continental Trail. I mean, most people only hike one of these trails in their life, and you've done all this in a series of 3 years, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I guess we'll kind of close out part 2 with you talking about this Key West Everglades road walk. And that's also known, I want to make sure I get this right, as the Overseas Heritage Trail. Is that correct?
So the Overseas Heritage Trail, I think, is just from Key West to Key Largo, and I think it's the Rails to Trail portion of there used to be, the railroad used to be the only way to get down there, and they've since paved that over, and so the Overseas Heritage Trail is that. The road walk from Key Largo to Big Cypress to is the other portion, but it's fair to call it the Key West to Everglades road walk, because that's the vast majority is on road.
So how many miles is that?
It's roughly 200.
Okay.
So from Key West to Key Largo through the Keys, you're on either paved rail trail or you are on road. And, there are lots of, it's famous for the bridges. You're walking across long bridges between islands, the longest of which was a 7-mile bridge, with no separation really from the traffic. And you're talking 2 hours of walking 2 feet away from 60-mile-an-hour traffic. Some really unique challenges to the Keys, really incredibly beautiful setting. If you haven't been down there, it's got a real Caribbean feel. There are, chickens running around and iguanas and coconut palms, and it really feels like you're in a storybook kind of.
Well, Will, I just imagine you walking across these bridges in your Hawaiian shirt, and you've got you're drinking one hand with an umbrella, and you're kind of chilling, right?
Yeah. No. They don't get an awful lot of hikers. And I had the thru hiker look at this point which the thru hiker look on a it looks like a thru hiker if you're in Damascus, Virginia, or if you're in somewhere on the AT. But if you're off the AT, that look is known as the homeless look. So it's you are not what it's a bit uncomfortable. It can be a bit uncomfortable to walk through places like that, the Alabama Road Walk or the Keys, for instance, where they might see 5 ECT hikers a year. So that's another aspect of the challenge. But I did meet 2 great trail angels down there. I happened to meet a guy named Scott, who is from South Carolina, let me stay in his RV overnight. And then another guy, I forgot his name, but he put me up. So, there have been amazing hospitality the whole trip, but Florida was especially kind.
So what would you leave us with a highlight of that road walk down there to Key West? Leave us with something we can remember.
I think the highlight was staying at the Everglades Hostel in Homestead, Florida. The Everglades Hostel was a really vibrant place with a lot of different folks there. And, you do a big road walk to get there. And then after that, you walk some canals to get to the next spot. But, you're kind of in between places. And, I settled in there and I met just a group of amazing people there. A lot of international people coming to travel. And I met my friend Simone there, who I still keep in touch with. And, she gave me a really awesome introduction to the city and the culture and everything down there. And, that was definitely a big highlight. But the whole thing was embracing the variety of challenges. And the Keys were definitely no different.
Well, Will, I think we are at a almost perfect point where we can close out what I'm going to call part 2 of this mini series. I want to let everybody know that we are definitely going to be back next Saturday for part 3 to finish our chat with Will. And we're going to be talking about some additional trails he hiked in this journey before he actually completed his continual footsteps home. We're going to talk about his final gear setup. And we're going to get into more of what I'm going to call the emotional side of the journey and Will's growth. So now we've come to the point in the podcast where Will is going to sign off for us by reading his own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us all to keep hiking section by section.
So this is a reflection that I wrote thinking back on one of my times on the Florida Trail. And I hope that it ties together some of the challenges that you face on the ECT, but also some of the things that can build you. But this is about my time in Big Cypress National Preserve. My last day in Big Cypress National Preserve gave me mud, 10 straight miles of bread dough, boot-sucking mud. The swamp was normally ankle to calf deep with a crystal clear sheet of water flowing from the north, but the same dry conditions that forced me to dig a scratch well in search of subterranean water the day before had me doomed to an entire day of fighting thick black mud. Even the notoriously muddy Vermont didn't compare. This was a true challenge. This was the ECT. To hike each step of the ECT is to honor an agreement with yourself to embrace every type of terrain in Eastern North America. Every steep, wet rock slab mountain, every swamp, every rural road, every narrow bridge, every challenge. This mud was just one in a long line of challenges. I had mentally prepared for this in the Longfellow and Mahoosic Mountains in Maine, and this challenge would in turn prepare me for the next. That just speaks to, the variety of challenges that you face, and the fact that if you want to do something like that, you have to agree to face them. And overcoming the last one, gives you that boost of momentum to take you through to the next. And that was my experience through the whole hike.
Well, thank you, Will. I really appreciate you coming on for part 2. And everybody, we will be back next week for part 3 of the why, the way, and the will. Thanks for joining me again, Will, for part 2 of the why, the way, and the will. Your highlights of the trails that make up the ECT were amazing. From the rolling hills and an amazing stay with the Amish to the road walk challenges in Alabama were simply incredible. I just wish the listeners could have seen your big smiles as you were talking about your journey. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will be back next week for the final episode of the mini-series with Will. And as always, happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.